Hello, and welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown.
The podcast where we watch 31 horror movies throughout the hallowed month of October.
Ranging from the critically acclaimed to film school projects gone gruesomely awry.
And we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Sully Hummel.
Now warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously while we take these movies seriously. Today we're talking about The Tunnel, which is the story of a news crew in Australia, Sydney, trying to break this big news story about homeless people living in tunnels that are going to be used for reclaiming water of some kind. I was unclear on that part of it.
Well, there's water got into these tunnels over the years.
Right, there was a lake down there.
And they want to build a water recycling plant to get that water out and have it as water, because it's nice to have water.
Right, and somehow that was going to displace these homeless people who were living in the tunnel. Mm-hmm. But whom the leadership of the area were claiming didn't exist. So this news crew was going to go down and they were going to find proof that these homeless people lived down here and that they would be impacted by this and whatnot. I took fewer notes of this movie than I have taken of any movie that we have ever watched, I believe.
I don't know if this is my fewest, but it is teeny tiny, I would say, single-digit number of notes.
And simultaneously, this felt like possibly the longest movie we have ever watched. And this is coming from someone who went on a first date as a high school freshman, possibly junior, higher, I don't remember, to Kevin Costner's JFK, which was probably not a great first date movie. So tell me a little bit about what emotions did this movie evoke in you?
Emotions, yeah. I felt boredom, felt frustration.
Yeah, is that it?
Confusion.
Oh, that's a good one. So
yeah, that's all I've got notes for, yeah.
So overall, you enjoyed it then?
Yeah. Yeah, this was all found footage movie, and I'm into found footage.
Yeah, did that redeem it in any way for you?
No.
I like how you elaborately studied your notes prior to answering that very important question.
The thing is, okay, this is what it makes me want to talk about.
Okay.
The huge problem in this movie, massive, is these guys are down there in these tunnels. It's scary, dark tunnels. We don't know what's going on. Monsters could be lurking around every corner, so there's tension and whatever. Except they constantly cut from that scary underground handheld camera, darkness, night vision business to interviews with these same characters after the fact, which, okay, on the straightforward front, you know they survived. They're being interviewed.
Right.
That's only 2 of them, though, so okay, 2 survivors, it's fine, and it lowers the stakes a bit, but it's fine. Right. The real problem is they go into a room and then they cut to the interview of the guy going, we went into this room and there was nothing of any interest in there. And then we cut back to the footage and we get to watch them walk through a room where there was nothing of interest. Or, it's more specific than that. It's like, oh, we thought we saw a monster around the corner, and then you cut to them potentially seeing a monster. And you're like, that erased any tension I could have felt.
Yeah.
And it kills the mood completely because you're no longer in that claustrophobic darkness. It's just somebody sitting at a table talking. It's terrible. It's the absolute worst thing they could do to this movie.
They totally defanged it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The thing that I disliked most, I actually liked the interview parts better than any of the rest of it. I agree with what you're saying in terms of that it ruined the tension of it, but I felt like there was some interesting acting going on in those interviews. Like there was some emoting that was happening. I liked that. And the underground parts were the epitome of what I hate about found footage movies. Every bit of it was too dark and swinging around and never really looking at anything, and there was no way to understand what you were seeing at all.
Oh, it was the worst for that. There were these parts at the end where they would like put the camera over. It was clear that a monster was crawling towards them out of the darkness. And then she would look away at the other wall.
Yeah. Why? Why was she doing that?
And then go back and you see a little bit more, but just barely. And by the time my eyes could comprehend what was being seen in all this crappy, grainy footage, I was like, okay, there, it's happening. Oh, never mind. It's the wall again.
Right. And it was going from like a really dark thing that the monster was coming out of to a really like gray wall, like light gray wall. So the color, like you would start to adjust to the darkness and being able to parse it out, and then all of a sudden you get a blast of brightness in your face. And I think it was also suffering from that thing that we've talked about already this month, where like when we watch Buffy, it's hard to see what's going on in the dark because it was digital, and the digital aspect of it doesn't translate to what we can what we can play now.
The channel on Roku that we watch this on is not a real channel. I mean, I guess it maybe is. It was some weird random thing I've never heard of, like Movies Fest or Movie Fun or something. And I kind of think it was actually created for this movie. And so it was really low quality.
It was
just pixels. And I do want to say about that, this movie is free for everyone. It was created to be free. It was like financed by some kind of process like Kickstarter, where people were like buying t-shirts or something for it. And that was interesting. So it's like, it's out there. You guys can enjoy it. Go for it. But it had this whole weird story behind how it came to be that I didn't really pay that much attention to.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that's cool. I like the idea of like a crowd-funded movie and then it being something that is available for everyone. Like that's very millennial and younger,
Yeah.
The whole, we're going to turn everything into turn this all into a socialist country. I'm there for that. I do feel like the story of how it was created is more interesting than the story they actually created.
Yes.
I got that there was a little bit of some kind of drama. Natasha, the on-camera talent of the crew, had clearly done something at some point that was problematic. Did you know what it was?
No.
Okay, so
No.
I don't think it was ever truly discussed. It was just hinted at occasionally. And this something had definitely pitted her against the crew that she was with.
That was very subtle for me.
It was so subtle. And so they didn't really discuss it. It was just like vague. But even though the story itself was vague, there was all this antagonism between the crew and herself. And it made everything very uncomfortable and very much like, I was like, I don't really want to be watching this like workplace drama. Like it wasn't interesting. It was just uncomfortable. Like I had accidentally walked into a room where people were having an argument and I was like, oops, nope, I don't belong here.
It wasn't a good feeling.
No, and there was no arc. Like there was no resolution of anything. I mean, I guess two of them were resolved in the sense that they were dead by the end.
That's good.
But I don't feel like she learned anything. I don't feel like Steven, who was the other person who survived, who was like the one who hated her the most, he didn't change at all. I don't get it.
I don't know. I feel like all the interpersonal stuff, the character stuff, just floated by me, and maybe it was just last night we were just not paying attention, but it felt like I was just not doing it with this movie. It was I really think that there was nothing grabbing us. And the length of time between when they set up, like there was a whole above ground thing where they're setting up what they're about to do. I was on board. I was like, okay, I'm getting the story. I understand what's happening. And then they went down underground. And then it was like we were watching in real time until they got to whatever part they wanted to film the actual action in, which meant that it was a lot
of them just walking through dark tunnels with nothing happening to them.
I think the premise was that they were, getting in too deep and losing their way, and that we could be concerned about that, and that was a bit of tension, but it wasn't.
It really wasn't. And part of it was that they weren't using that time. Like, I get, that would make sense if they were going in further and further. And there definitely was a part of me that was like, oh, you're way too far into these tunnels. You're not going to find your way out. Like, I wouldn't be able to find my way out. This is a scary place. I wouldn't want to be where they were. The thing is, they weren't using that time to do anything else. And that's one of the things that, like when I'm doing my own writing or when I'm giving feedback to other people in my writing group, like, your writing should be doing multiple things at the same time. Like, okay, partly it's establishing the passage of time, but you could also have had them having conversations about what had happened. Like, they could have been bickering about this event that happened and giving us that information.
Yeah, and I felt like the lead up to going in the tunnels was much too long and repetitive, and like it wasn't telling me anything. That all could have been intercut with the walking through the tunnels and give us that backstory while we're waiting for them to get where they're going.
Walking through the tunnels, cutting to interviews, that's fine, because neither one of them is anything big and exciting happening. You're not diluting the action at all. And then at the end, it was very short, but also very uninformative and didn't feel like a conclusion at all. Like, you think of that post-climax part of a story as the part that wraps up the loose ends and like gives you all the necessary information to be able to be like, okay, I understand what happened there.
Yeah.
I understand nothing from that.
This monster, they didn't know anything about it going in. They just had hints that some homeless people had been disappearing inside these tunnels. So you're like, okay, they're being hunted by a monster.
And that one guy they interviewed, had a full-on mental breakdown at the mention of stuff going on in the tunnels. Yeah,
it was bad. They
clearly
were very concerned, so okay, cool. But then it never developed anything. We still know nothing about this monster, not even what it can do, because at one point it flashed across the room so fast you couldn't see it, and then in all the other scenes it was kind of like walking along all slow. So I don't even know what threat it posed or what the concerns were, because we knew nothing.
And the weirdest part is that the one guy, the first guy who died, Tangles, he's out in the water. The monster comes up behind him and then slowly breaks his neck, twists his head to the side.
Maybe that was Tangles. I didn't think it was. I thought that was the security guard that had gotten swooped. It could be either, because that's how unclear the video on this movie was.
Yeah, you're right, because they never figured out what happened to Tangles.
Yeah, Tangles appeared to be vaporized.
Yes.
Like a kid from the Midnight Man.
Yes, it was the security guard. But he it dragged him out into the water, and then
there was something wrong with him. He was a zombie.
Yes.
Which is weird. That wasn't explained in any way.
No. But then he just stood there and waited as the monster, slowly, sloth-like, put his hand around his neck and his shoulders and, twisted his head off over to one side.
Yeah, and that was another one of those kind of things where it was so vague and unclear that I couldn't... I got the idea that his neck was broken, but it was such a weird series of movements that I don't really understand what we were seeing.
Right. Also, that is a move that usually, military-trained... killers use, and that you do quickly. It's not a slow motion move.
I mean, if you're really strong, you just keep pulling.
I don't know. And then the other guy, Pete, he got taken. He and Steve were trying to save Natasha, which was, very heroic of them or something. Yay. I don't know. And Natasha and Steve got out of the water and Pete didn't. So we thought oh, he's gone. But then later he just comes running out of the darkness. We don't know how he got away from the slow motion neck breaking monster.
Or fast monster.
Or really fast vaporizing monster.
Who knows how to use a camera.
Right. And he shows up, but then he immediately dies of what apparently was internal bleeding.
Right, at the very end.
That's what it said at the very end.
Yeah, he had internal injuries. He died. And that was that.
There's no...
Yeah.
It's almost like, as the Kickstarter, one of the levels was like, if you pay this much, you get to give us, like, one sentence of the story.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. It feels like it was one of those stories that was, like, written in a round table version. Like, write a sentence, pass it on sort of thing. None of it made sense.
Yeah, it's like they didn't define what they were doing at all. They just kind of went with it. And as a result, like, that's why we never knew what danger they were in. Like, they were able to just run out of there when this was a monster that could instantly swoop down on people and seemingly be anywhere it wanted. So, I don't know. It never was clear, and I think they intended it that way so that they could just have anything happen. And that's what makes it not a story. Like,
no, that's lazy.
There's no logic to that.
There was a point where one of them decided or established that it was afraid of light, or that it was chased away by light. But then they were incredibly careless with the limited amount of light they had. Like, they had a couple of batteries for the camera that had a light on it, and they had a couple of flashlights, and they were constantly losing their flashlights or leaving them in other rooms. Yeah. And they would, like, have both flashlights and the camera all illuminated at the same time. I'm like, what are you doing?
But even with your description of it, how you're not liking it, that makes it sound like it was much more structured and logical than it was. Like that there was this interesting challenge where they're like, oh, it's afraid of light. Let's carefully manage our lights and, find our way through here, get back without ever losing lights. And, oh no, this light's going out. And what is happening? None of that happened. It was just wild craziness.
The whole idea that it could be chased away by light was put in there so that they could get out of a couple of situations that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to get out of, but then was never actually used for any real purpose. Like, it had no point in the end game of it.
Yeah.
The other thing that came up that, again, was sort of like, it's happening right now in this scene, and it's never going to be of any importance at any point in the future, was the fact that so Tangles got pushed in the water, and then he started hearing things.
Yeah, he did.
So, like, it was suggested that he was sort of losing his mind, or sort of, like, being impacted by having been in the water.
Well, that, or because he was the sound guy, he was just getting, better sound. He was, hearing through his headphones things that they couldn't hear that were, like, in the distance.
Yes, that is possible.
I don't know which it was.
Because then, when Steve put on the headphones, he also heard it, and then later, during the interviews, months later, they have Natasha for the first time listen to it, and she's also hearing this screaming.
Yeah, well, and I think that case was actually just, like, Tangles screaming that he was being killed, which doesn't make sense that they wouldn't have heard that in the first place, but whatever. And that whole scene had this whole, I'm getting off track of my issue because this is a whole other issue. There was a whole thing where Tangles wanted to go to another room to record the sound of this bell because the bell was too loud. And Steve makes a comment about how it's really strange. I don't know why he would do it that way. As if there's something going on with him and he's possessed, or he's secretly working against them, or something. But there was nothing.
And also, it seemed to me like it made a lot of sense to go into the other room since it was too loud and it was pegging out his meters.
But that was the whole thing. And then they put the headphones on Natasha months after this event to hear it for the first time. And she's all, like, shocked and confused. Like, she lived through the rest of this event. This isn't new to her at that point.
And so it was suggesting that what they heard in those headphones was something really important.
Yeah.
And it was not. Like, it became nothing. Like, that was the last. Her listening in the headphones was the last they mentioned of it.
Yeah.
From that point on, it had nothing to do with it.
Because they lost their sound guy.
So, right. We haven't done this yet this year, but we did it quite a bit, I think, last year or the year before.
Dramatic reenactments?
No, we're never doing that again. Sorry.
I know.
No, we used to come up with better endings or like rewrite the movie so that it works.
I have some ideas.
I have some ideas too.
What do you got?
So it would take a complete overhaul of this movie. But at the beginning, there's a point where Tangles is trying to get some, I think, just like B sound for their report.
Yes.
And they like come across this, I don't know.
Like a minecart.
Wagon. Yeah, minecart, yes. And he has Pete like lift up the handle so that it makes like a creaking noise, and then it thunks against the minecart, and then they push the minecart into the darkness and it makes like a rattly noise, which was fine. It made perfect sense when it was happening.
Yeah.
And then later, they were listening to something. Maybe it was in the headphones even. I don't know.
Remember.
Somewhere, somebody was listening, and it was what could have been exactly the creaking noise, the thunk, the rattling into the darkness. I was like,
yeah.
Is that the same sound? Like, did we just hear what happened earlier in the movie? That's interesting.
That would be very interesting.
And then, later toward the end of the movie, when somebody was screaming and running and whatever, there was chaos happening, I realized this sounds very much like the screaming that was on the headphones that didn't make any sense, because if Tangles had been in the next room screaming, we would have heard him.
Yeah.
Like, I kept, like, there were those two points where I noticed distinct, I was like, oh my gosh, are they going to pull this back into amazingness by having it be like a temporal distortion displacement thing?
That sounds cool. Or are we just too dumb to get the movie and they did do that?
They did not do that.
Okay.
I in no way feel too dumb for this movie. I'm sorry. So that's what I want. I wanted this to be some kind of messing around with time movie. That would have been cool.
That would have been
That's
cool.
how I would rewrite it. What would you do?
Well, I don't know if I have anything that thorough. It's just that I want to say, until they got so swirly and crazy at the end where you couldn't see anything or hear anything, it was just random noise and noise and light. It was like pointless to even watch the movie towards the end. Before they got to that, when they're going through scary tunnels in the dark, that was really good. Like, not as a movie, but as a visual experience. It was good, scary stuff, good tunnels and looking through them and who knows what could be down here. And it was killed over and over again by those interviews. What I would do is remove the interviews, remove the start of the movie, start with entering the tunnels. You could add some lines while they're going through the tunnels talking about, hey, let's go check this out because we want to see if there are homeless people here. You know, you can set things up while they're happening. And just non-stop footage of them in the tunnels doing their thing, never interrupted by anything else. And you would get into it, you'd get engrossed, you'd get lost and scared and be in the dark.
It would be like that movie where they went into the catacombs.
As above, so below.
Yes. It would be like that. They went under there, they went into the catacombs.
Yeah.
And
The
that was it. It was
I
just...
think looked like this too.
It was, well, I mean, blobs in the darkness.
Well, I mean, like, they look, this monster and those ones, I might not be remembering those right, but I think looked like Boris Karloff vampires, kind of, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that would have definitely improved it. Of course, you would have also had to get them to do some acting while they were down in the tunnels, because
I would like that.
The acting that they did in those talking head interviews was night and day compared to the acting that they were doing while they were in the tunnels. It was like they were two different people.
Yeah, they were just running around screaming.
Ratings. I am all for independent creativity. I'm all for crowdsourcing creativity. I'm all for getting out there and doing the thing and creating the thing, and I fully support the people who made this movie for doing the thing.
Good job, guys.
Good job. That being said, as a movie, part of doing the thing is then, you know, people interact with the thing and have reactions to the thing. And my reaction, I know. As a thing creator, that's not my favorite part. Unless they have nice things to say, in which case it is definitely my favorite part.
That is my favorite part for sure.
Unfortunately, my reaction to this movie was not great. There wasn't much I liked about it. It didn't hold my interest. I was disappointed. I felt let down. So I am going to give this movie a rating of 1 extremely overlit, unused underground tunnel out of 5.
Yeah, they had like a mile straight of fluorescent lights in this tunnel that was not to be used by anyone.
No, it was an abandoned tunnel. And it was crazy how they had full-on, like, security systems with night vision cameras and stuff in all of these abandoned tunnels that, because they were alternating they had the footage that these people had taken while they were down there, but then every once in a while they also had, like, City of Sydney security cameras where they were like, here are some people down in this abandoned tunnel that's fully lit for no reason at all.
Yeah, they spent so much money every night just throwing it away.
Yeah. How about you? How would you rate this?
This movie was a phenomenal disappointment.
Oh.
I actually have had this on my list for a couple of years, and now I see it.
And nobody warned you that it was going to be what it was?
I try to avoid the reviews and stuff, and now although I think this movie is fairly well reviewed, which is weird. I don't understand that. However, my opinion of this movie is as yours. It was such a letdown of what should have been so much fun that I am also going to give it 1 extremely overlit, unused underground tunnel out of 5. Because there's just no reason. This movie it's terrible. And it could have been good and failed so hard.
Mm-hmm. I always like it when you and I agree on our ratings while simultaneously disagreeing with the rest of the world as they rate something. And that's happened a couple times. Like if this had high ratings and we're both like, this is terrible. Or, I'm going to mention it again, House of a Thousand Corpses. Was panned by critics, and I thought it was amazing.
I did too.
I was looking up some past reviews in order to share movie titles with somebody who wanted to watch horror movies, and I came across the fact that we both gave The Monster 5s, and it had very middle of the road reviews from other people.
So it was really good.
Liked it. All right, well, I guess that wraps up this tunnel, caves in this tunnel, but the lights are still on.
They will be on forever.
Ooh.
Maybe that was the whole thing. It was like a nightlight. Like they kept these lights on to keep the monster trapped inside because the city knew.
The city did know. That was part of it, was that the city had plans to do this thing and then had quietly opted to not do it.
Yeah.
So I think you might be onto something.
They were
there.
like, here's the solution to our homeless problem.
Have this well-lit tunnel down to this dry place that they can live while we feed this monster who would otherwise come and eat the rest of us. Maybe, okay. Maybe this movie was way too smart for me.
See? I told you.
I don't know.
It's a metaphor for abortion.
What?
I don't know. While I was saying the word metaphor, I was trying to think of any kind of hard-hitting topic I could throw at the end. That's what I came up with.
Okay, I'm done with this. We're
Bye.
done. Goodbye.
Dramatic
Reenactment. Yay!